The world is not fair, and the sooner you accept this brutal truth, the sooner you can stop being its victim. Right now, while you're watching this, someone less intelligent than you is commanding more respect. Someone weaker than you is wielding more influence. Someone with fewer skills than you is living the life you want, simply because they understand the dark psychology of human nature. You've been programmed to play by rules that others broke long ago. You've been conditioned to be nice while others are being strategic. You've been taught to wait for respect while others are taking it. The game is rigged, but not in the way you think. It's rigged against those who refuse to learn its real rules. It's rigged against those who believe fairness exists. It's rigged against those who think good intentions matter more than psychological dominance. 500 years ago, Niccolo Machiavelli decoded the true mechanics of power and influence. He discovered why good men finish last and why ruthless strategists rule the world. Today, I'm going to share 8 dark psychological principles that will transform you from someone who gets overlooked to someone who becomes dangerously confident, untouchable, and impossible to ignore. But I'm warning you, once you see the matrix of human psychology, you can never unsee it. Once you understand these principles, you'll never be able to play the victim again. Let me tell you about the moment everything changed for me. I used to be that guy who had all the right answers, but no one listened. I was intelligent, hardworking, genuine, and completely invisible. I watched as confident idiots got promoted over me. I saw manipulative people build empires while honest people struggled. I witnessed charismatic sociopaths attract followers while decent people ate alone. And then I realized the truth that no one wants to admit. The world doesn't reward intelligence. It rewards influence. It doesn't respect good hearts. It respects strong presence. It doesn't care about your character. It cares about your psychological dominance. This realization destroyed my naive worldview, but it also liberated me from a life of frustration and invisibility. Machiavelli lived in Renaissance Italy, surrounded by political intrigue, betrayal, and psychological warfare. He watched kingdoms rise and fall based on one simple principle. Those who understand human psychology rule those who don't. His observations aren't just historical curiosities. They're operating manuals for anyone who wants to stop being manipulated and start becoming magnetic. Being ruthless doesn't mean being cruel. It means being psychologically sophisticated. It means understanding that while you're playing checkers with good intentions, others are playing chess with calculated moves. Here's what I need you to do before we dive deep. Write this declaration in the comments. I refuse to be psychologically dominated by others. This isn't just a comment. It's your first step towards psychological sovereignty, because everything I'm about to teach you requires one fundamental shift. From victim mindset to predator mindset. Are you ready to become dangerously confident? Let's begin. Number 1. Fairness is a psychological trap. Here's the first brutal truth. Fairness is a lie sold to keep you weak and compliant. Every time you wait for fair treatment, someone else is taking what you want. Every time you play by imaginary rules, others are rewriting the game to their advantage. Every time you expect reciprocity, manipulators are exploiting your predictable behavior. You've been conditioned to believe that being fair makes you noble. In reality, it makes you prey. Think about your own life. How many times have you given respect to someone who showed you none? How many times have you helped someone who never helped you back? How many times have you waited for your turn while others cut the line? This isn't because you're unlucky. This is because you're psychologically programmed to lose. Machiavelli observed, Men should either be treated generously or destroyed, because they take revenge for slight injuries. For heavy ones, they cannot. This isn't about physical violence. It's about psychological warfare. When you wound someone's ego slightly, they remember and plot revenge. When you psychologically dominate them completely, they accept their position and move on. Most people make the mistake of half measures. They give weak pushback to strong personalities. They set soft boundaries with aggressive people. They try to reason with those who operate on pure self-interest. This creates the worst possible outcome. You look weak, but you also create enemies who see you as a target they can eventually defeat. Here's what psychological dominance actually looks like. When someone disrespects you, you don't argue or explain why they're wrong. You simply demonstrate through your actions that disrespecting you comes with immediate and severe social consequences. You don't negotiate with people who don't respect your worth. You don't try to convince people to treat you better. You create situations where treating you well is in their self-interest, and treating you poorly costs them something they value. Stop being fair with people who aren't fair to you. Start being strategic with people who only understand power dynamics. Number 2, ruthlessness is emotional discipline. Most people think ruthless means losing control and lashing out. They're completely wrong. True ruthlessness is the opposite. It's ice-cold emotional discipline. Ruthless people don't get angry. They get strategic. They don't react emotionally. They respond calculatedly. They don't make decisions from hurt feelings. They make decisions from logical assessment of what serves their interests. This is why emotionally reactive people never build real influence. They're predictable. They can be manipulated by anyone who knows which buttons to push. They give their power away every time someone makes them lose their composure. Psychologically dominant people understand that emotions are information, not instructions. They feel the anger, frustration, or disappointment, but they don't let these feelings control their actions. Let me give you an example. Someone publicly embarrasses you or tries to undermine your reputation. The emotionally reactive person gets defensive, argues, tries to explain why they're right. This makes them look weak and validates the attacker's power. The ruthlessly disciplined person does something different. They note the attack, feel the emotion, then ask, what response would be most damaging to this person's social standing while elevating mine? Maybe they ignore the attack completely, demonstrating that the attacker isn't worth their energy. Maybe they respond with cold, factual correction that makes the attacker look foolish. Maybe they use the attack as an opportunity to show their superior composure. The key is that their response is chosen, not triggered. Machiavelli understood this. Injuries should be inflicted all at once, so that their ill savor, being less lasting, may give less offense. When you must respond to psychological attacks, make your response decisive and final. Don't engage in ongoing drama. Don't get pulled into emotional back and forth. Make one calculated move that ends the conflict in your favor. Think about the most psychologically powerful people you know. Do they lose their temper regularly? Do they get into shouting matches? Do they let others control their emotional state? Nah. They maintain emotional sovereignty. They choose their battles. They respond from strategy, not from feelings. This emotional discipline becomes a source of tremendous psychological power. When others know they can't manipulate your emotions, they start treating you with caution and respect. Master your emotional responses. Let others react while you strategically respond. Number 3. Psychological dominance trumps likability. This truth will shatter your people-pleasing programming. being respected is infinitely more valuable than being liked. When people merely like you, they take risks with your feelings because they assume you'll forgive them. When people respect your psychological strength, they think twice before crossing you because they know there will be consequences. Likeable people are safe. They're predictable. They're easy to take advantage of because everyone knows they won't retaliate meaningfully. Psychologically dominant people are dangerous. They're unpredictable. They're treated with caution because everyone knows they can and will defend their interests. Think about your social circles. Who gets the most respect? The nicest person or the person with the strongest presence? Who do people consult before making decisions? The one who agrees with everyone or the one whose approval actually matters? Machiavelli was direct about this. It is much safer to be feared than loved if one has to lack one of the two. This doesn't mean being a tyrant. It means being someone others know they cannot disrespect without facing real consequences. It means having a reputation for being fair, but formidable. Here's how this works in practice. Likeable people say yes to requests they don't want to fulfill because they fear disappointing others. Dominant people say no without guilt because they prioritize their own interests. Likeable people accept disrespect and hope it will stop. Dominant people address disrespect immediately and decisively. Likeable people try to be included in everything. Dominant people are selective about what deserves their presence. Likeable people explain and justify their decisions. Dominant people make decisions and expect others to adapt. The psychological shift from likability to dominance is profound. Instead of asking, "Will they like me if I do this?" you start asking, "Will this action increase or decrease my social power?" Instead of trying to make everyone comfortable, you become comfortable with others' discomfort when it serves your interests. Instead of seeking approval, you become someone whose approval others seek. This isn't about becoming an asshole. It's about becoming someone whose respect must be earned, rather than someone who gives respect freely to those who don't value it. Build psychological dominance through consistent demonstration of your standards and boundaries. Let others compete for your approval instead of competing for theirs. Number 4, decisive action creates psychological superiority. Here's where most people destroy their influence. They make weak moves repeatedly instead of strong moves rarely. Psychologically weak people constantly threaten consequences they never deliver. They give multiple warnings that train others to ignore them. They try to control through nagging, pleading, and emotional manipulation. This creates a terrible reputation. Everyone knows you're all bark and no bite. People learn to tune out your complaints because your warnings have no real power behind them. Psychologically dominant people operate differently. They give fewer warnings, but when they act, their actions are decisive and memorable. Machiavelli observed, "If an injury has to be done to a man, it should be so severe that his vengeance need not be feared." In psychological terms, this means when you must demonstrate your power, make it so clear and final that people understand not to test you again. Let me give you a concrete example. Someone in your social circle consistently disrespects you, interrupting you, dismissing your opinions, making jokes at your expense. The psychologically weak response is to keep asking them to stop, getting frustrated, complaining to others about their behavior. This actually reinforces their dominance because they see they can affect your emotional state without facing real consequences. The psychologically dominant response is different. You document the pattern, then you act once and decisively. Maybe you publicly call out their behavior in a way that embarrasses them. Maybe you exclude them from something they value. Maybe you demonstrate your social power by turning others against their behavior. The key is that your response is disproportionately strong compared to any single incident, but proportionate to the overall pattern of disrespect. This creates psychological impact. Others see that disrespecting you has real costs. They also see that you're not someone who makes empty threats. When you act with force. This principle works in all areas of influence. Instead of constantly trying to convince people of your value, you occasionally demonstrate it so powerfully that the lesson sticks permanently. Instead of always being available and helpful, you're occasionally unavailable in a way that makes people realize they need you more than you need them. Instead of arguing your position repeatedly, you take actions that make your position undeniable. Make fewer threats, but follow through completely when you act. Build a reputation for decisive action rather than empty warnings. Number 5. Perception management is reality control. This is the most sophisticated form of psychological influence. Understanding that people's perception of you matters more than the objective reality of who you are. Most people focus entirely on being good and assume others will naturally recognize their value. This is naive. Human psychology doesn't work that way. People don't have time to investigate your character deeply. They make snap judgments based on surface signals and social proof. If you don't actively manage how others perceive you, someone else will manage it for you, and not in your favor. Machiavelli understood this completely. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. This means that for the vast majority of people you encounter, your image is your reality. Your reputation is your power. Your perceived value is your actual value in their minds. Psychologically sophisticated people understand this and actively craft their image. They control the narrative about who they are before others create that narrative for them. This isn't about being fake. It's about being strategic in how you present your authentic qualities. Think about social media. Two people accomplish the same thing. One person documents it strategically, showing their competence and success. The other person says nothing, assuming their work speaks for itself. Which person gets more recognition, opportunities, and respect? The one who managed their perception. In face-to-face interactions, this means understanding that your body language, voice tone, clothing, and social confidence communicate your value before you say a single word. If you walk into a room with confident posture, make eye contact, and speak with authority, people unconsciously categorize you as someone important. If you slouch, avoid eye contact, and speak tentatively, people unconsciously dismiss you as unimportant. The psychological principle is simple. People treat you according to how you train them to see you. Here's how perception management works in practice. You control what stories people hear about you by strategically sharing your successes and downplaying your failures. You associate yourself with high-value people and activities to elevate your social status by proximity. You maintain some mystery about yourself, so people fill in the blanks with positive assumptions rather than knowing all your weaknesses. You project confidence even when you feel uncertain, because confidence is contagious and uncertainty is repulsive. Your reputation is your most valuable asset. Protect it, cultivate it, and leverage it strategically. Number 6. Narrative control is psychological warfare. This is the ultimate power move, controlling not just what happens, but how what happens gets interpreted and remembered. Every situation can be framed multiple ways. The same action can be seen as leadership or arrogance, confidence or selfishness, strength or aggression. The person who controls the narrative controls the meaning. Most people focus entirely on their actions and ignore the story being told about those actions. This is a massive mistake. In human psychology, the story often matters more than the facts. Think about any conflict you've witnessed. The person who gets to tell their version first and most persuasively usually wins in the court of public opinion, regardless of who was actually right. Machiavelli observed, "Men in general judge more from appearances than from reality. People don't have time to investigate every situation thoroughly. They rely on the simplified story they hear from trusted sources. Whoever controls that story controls what people believe. This means you must become skilled at framing your actions in ways that serve your interests. When you succeed, you control the story of how you succeeded. When you fail, you control the story of what you learned. When others attack you, you control the counter-narrative. Here's how narrative warfare works in practice. When you make a difficult decision that might be unpopular, you frame it in terms of principles and long-term thinking rather than immediate self-interest. When someone tries to make you look bad, you don't just defend yourself. You reframe their attack as evidence of their weakness or jealousy. When you achieve something significant, you tell the story in a way that highlights your strategic thinking and character, not just your luck or natural talent. Let me give you a concrete example. You decide to cut off a toxic friend who has been draining your energy. They might tell people you're selfish and abandon them when they needed you most. If you don't control this narrative, people might see you as heartless. But if you proactively frame the story, "I had to set boundaries with someone who was affecting my mental health and refused to respect basic friendship reciprocity," people see you as someone who values themselves appropriately. The same action, completely different perception. Advanced narrative control means anticipating how your actions will be interpreted and getting ahead of negative interpretations before they take hold. Always consider not just what you're doing, but how what you're doing will be perceived and discussed. Shape the story before others shape it for you. Number 7. Systematic consequences. Create psychological authority. The most sophisticated form of influence doesn't rely on emotion, threats, or manipulation. It relies on creating predictable systems where certain behaviors automatically lead to certain outcomes. This is psychological mastery because it removes your personality from the equation. People can't argue with systems the way they argue with personal decisions. They can't manipulate automatic consequences the way they manipulate emotional responses. When you base your authority on getting angry or making threats, you're giving others control over your power. They can push your buttons, manipulate your emotions, and negotiate with your reactions. But when you create systems where respect leads to access and disrespect leads to exclusion, you maintain complete psychological control. Machiavelli understood this. A wise ruler should rely on what is in his own control, not on what is in the control of others. Here's how systematic authority works in practice. Instead of arguing with people who don't respect your time, you simply become unavailable when they need you. Instead of getting angry at people who take advantage of your generosity, you quietly redirect your help to those who show appreciation. Instead of trying to convince people to treat you better, you create situations where treating you well benefits them and treating you poorly costs them. Let me give you a specific example. You have friends who always expect you to be the one who plans social activities, but they frequently cancel last minute or show up late. The emotionally reactive approach is to get frustrated, complain about their behavior, or give them guilt trips about being unreliable. The systematically authoritative approach is different. I plan activities for people who confirm attendance and show up on time. If someone develops a pattern of cancelling or tardiness, I stop including them in planning. You don't announce this as a threat or punishment. You simply implement it as a natural system. People who value your effort get more of it. People who waste your effort get less of it. This creates psychological authority because people start modifying their behavior to maintain access to what you provide. They can't argue with the system because it's based on logical consequences rather than emotional reactions. The most powerful part of this approach is that it's self-maintaining. You don't have to constantly enforce rules or remind people of boundaries. The natural consequences do the work for you. Create systems where people's behavior toward you automatically determines their access to your value. Let natural consequences teach people how to treat you. Number 8. Silent dominance is ultimate power. Here's the final and most crucial lesson. True psychological dominance operates in silence. People who constantly talk about how tough, smart, or ruthless they are usually aren't. They're advertising what they wish they possessed, rather than demonstrating what they actually control. Real power doesn't need to announce itself. Real influence works behind the scenes. Real psychological dominance is felt rather than declared. The most dangerous people in any room are often the quietest ones. They're observing while others are performing. They're calculating while others are reacting. They're positioning while others are posturing. Think about the most psychologically powerful people you've encountered. Do they constantly remind you of their power? Do they brag about their influence? Do they threaten people who cross them? Nah. Their power is assumed, not announced. Their influence is demonstrated through results, not through declarations. Their dominance is felt through presence, not through words. Machiavelli captured this perfectly. The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves. This means you must be strategically intelligent when situations require cunning and psychologically forceful when situations require strength. But the key is transitioning seamlessly between these modes without telegraphing your strategy. In practical terms, this means your competitors don't see your moves until it's too late to counter them. Your allies don't know how you're positioning them until they benefit from your positioning. Your enemies don't realize you're undermining them until their influence has already crumbled. Silent dominance looks like this. You work on building influence without announcing your ambitions. You position yourself strategically without making your strategy obvious. You gather information about others while revealing minimal information about yourself. You build alliances that serve your interests without making the alliance obvious to your competitors. You undermine those who work against you without them realizing the source of their declining influence. This isn't about being sneaky or dishonest. This is about understanding that strategic discretion is more powerful than tactical transparency. When you operate with silent dominance, people start experiencing your power without understanding how you acquired it. This makes your influence seem natural and inevitable rather than calculated and aggressive. Build your psychological empire quietly. Let others make noise while you make strategic moves. Demonstrate power through results, not through announcements. Here's the final truth that will determine whether you remain psychologically dominated or become dangerously confident. If you don't master the dark psychology of human influence, someone who has mastered it will control your life. This isn't a philosophical debate. This is psychological warfare happening around you every day. Right now, while you've been learning these principles, Someone is using them against people who don't understand them. Manipulative people are exploiting those who believe in fairness. Psychologically dominant individuals are positioning themselves above those who think good intentions matter more than strategic thinking. The choice is brutal but simple. Become someone who understands and uses psychological influence, or remain someone who gets influenced and used by others. You've been conditioned to think that learning these principles makes you bad. That's exactly what psychologically dominant people want you to believe. They want you to remain naive, predictable, and easy to manipulate while they operate with sophisticated understanding of human psychology. Every day you delay implementing these lessons is another day someone more ruthless is building the influence and respect you want. Every day you choose to remain nice instead of becoming strategically formidable is another day you give psychological ammunition to those who see kindness as weakness. The world doesn't need more naive, nice guys who finish last. The world needs more people who understand psychological realities and use that understanding to build lives of genuine influence and unshakable confidence. If these dark truths have awakened something in you, if you're tired of being psychologically dominated by others, then prove it. Like this video to show you're ready to stop being naive. Share it with someone who needs to understand that niceness without psychological strength is just weakness with good intentions. Subscribe, because these lessons are just the beginning of your transformation from someone who gets overlooked to someone who becomes impossible to ignore. Remember what you declared in the comments. I refuse to be psychologically dominated by others. Now stop refusing and start dominating. The choice is yours, but choose quickly, because while you're deciding whether to become psychologically dangerous, dangerous people are already deciding what to do with you.